Okay, so like buckle up, guys, because today we are diving into, well, it's a political thriller, basically. Twists, international intrigue, seriously high stakes. We're talking Venezuela.
And what's so fascinating about this is, well, it's not just another, political controversy. It's this whole tangled web, right? You've got internal power struggles in Venezuela, but then you've got these international pressure points too.
Exactly. So before we even get into this document that everyone's talking about, let's make sure we're all on the same page here. Venezuela's political landscape, I mean, it's been chaotic, to say the least, right?
Right.
Nicolás Maduro, he's holding on to power, but there are constant challenges to, well, his legitimacy, especially after that, that super contested election back in 2018.
Yeah, and that's where Edmundo González Urrutia comes in. He's a huge opposition leader, so he's been a real thorn in Maduro's side. But then things changed when González Urrutia was granted not safe passage to Spain.
Right, being allowed to leave Venezuela and seek refuge in Spain.
Exactly. It happens pretty often when someone's safety is at risk because of political turmoil.
Okay, so that's the backdrop. Now, here's the bombshell. Just before he left for Spain, González Urrutia signs this document. It basically acknowledges Maduro's victory, right? But he claims he was forced into it.
Yeah, he says he signed it under duress, which is, well, it's a very troubling thing to claim. It implies, right, that he signed under threat, like he was fearing for his safety or, I mean, maybe even his life.
Wow.
And given what we know about the Maduro government and how they silence people who disagree with them, it's no wonder this claim has caused such a stir, not just in Venezuela, but internationally, too.
It's a chilling thought. Anyone being forced to, compromise what they believe in under that kind of pressure, But here's what I don't get. If Maduro was so sure of himself, so confident in his supposed victory, why go through the effort of making this document public?
Right, right. Why even reveal this agreement exists unless it serves some bigger purpose? It's more than just discrediting González Urrutia, that's for sure.
Well, I mean, think about it. Having this signed document, even if it was signed, under pressure, it could be a powerful tool for Maduro. He can use it to silence anyone who criticizes him.
So it's about looking strong,
Right.
projecting this image that he's in control, that his victory is legitimate, both inside Venezuela and to the rest of the world.
Exactly. It's like he's saying, see, even my opponents agree I won.
Okay.
And that kind of message, that could definitely influence, maybe even convince some international players who might be on the fence about criticizing him, especially if they see it as him having some support within Venezuela. Although this could backfire on Maduro, too.
House. Okay, so let's say you're a Venezuelan citizen and you're against Maduro. If you see González Urrutia, like, giving in under pressure, are you going to feel hopeful about democracy returning to Venezuela anytime soon? Probably not. It could create this sense of doubt, even division within the opposition movement. And if they're divided, it's much harder to challenge someone like Maduro.
So it's risky. It might make Maduro look stronger to some, but it could also make things even harder for the people who want to see him gone. And then there's the impact on, well, the Venezuelan people caught in the middle of all this.
Absolutely. And speaking of risks, this situation has caused quite a stir in Spain, especially with the Partido Popular, or PP.
Right, the PP, they've been pretty outspoken about the Spanish government's response to all this, haven't they?
They have not held back. One PP leader even went so far as to call it a diplomatic disaster. They're basically accusing the Spanish government of, well, helping to legitimize a dictator.
Wow.
Yeah, and they're demanding a parliamentary inquiry into the government's actions.
So they're using this to their advantage politically, trying to make their rivals look bad. But what are they really hoping to achieve with all this?
Well, the PP has always had a much stronger stance on Venezuela, way more so than the current government in Spain. They've been pushing the European Union to get tougher on Maduro. And this whole González Urrutia situation, this just plays right into what they've been saying all along.
So it's not just about Venezuela anymore, is it? It's become part of these internal political battles in Spain.
Exactly. And what makes this even more, I guess you could say, dramatic, is that the PP has taken their fight to, well, the European Parliament.
And what are they hoping to accomplish there?
Okay, so get this. The PP has teamed up with some far-right parties, and they're actually trying to get the European Parliament to officially recognize Edmundo González Urrutia as the legitimate president of Venezuela.
If they manage to pull that off, that would be huge. I mean, it would seriously damage Maduro's standing internationally. But is that even possible, realistically?
It's hard to say. The European Parliament has definitely condemned Maduro's government and called for new elections, free and fair ones. But they've never actually recognized Juan Guaido, the opposition leader backed by the U.S. and a few other countries.
Right.
So for them to recognize González Urrutia, that'd be a major change in strategy for sure. Could even set a precedent, like how the EU might respond to other situations where a leader's legitimacy is in question.
It's a huge gamble for the PP, no doubt. But this whole thing, from that signed document to all the reactions it's provoked, it makes you wonder, can organizations like the EU, even the UN, really step in and effectively defend democracy when you have a leader like Maduro who seems willing to do whatever it takes to hold on to power?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It feels like international relations have been wrestling with that forever, and there's no easy answer.
It's definitely tricky, especially when you're dealing with someone like Maduro who just seems to ignore international pressure. But let's not forget the people stuck right in the middle of all this. The Venezuelan people. What could this mean for them? It's easy to get lost in the weeds with all this international stuff, but we can't forget who's really feeling the weight of this. It's the Venezuelan people, right? And they've already been through so much.
It really is a humanitarian crisis. Years of, mismanagement, corruption that's led to hyperinflation, shortages of basic necessities. I mean, people are fleeing the country. And this whole situation with González Urrutia, it just adds another layer of, uncertainty, suffering on top of everything else they're dealing with.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine how any of this could make their lives better, at least not anytime soon.
I'd say you're right to be worried. If things escalate, it's the Venezuelan people who will suffer the most. More repression, violence, even worse economic conditions. These are all very real possibilities, unfortunately.
It's really sad to think about. And speaking of escalation, what about the other big players on the world stage? How might the United States, even other Latin American countries, how might they react to all this?
Well, the U.S. has been pretty clear about their stance on Maduro. They've been critical for years, and they've already hit his government with sanctions. This whole thing with González Urrutia, it might push them to take even stronger action.
So more pressure on Maduro.
It's definitely possible. We could see more diplomatic pressure, maybe even tougher economic sanctions, maybe even attempts to isolate Venezuela more internationally.
So the U.S. might see this as a chance to really turn up the heat on Maduro then?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. But here's the thing. The U.S. is also going to be watching how other Latin American countries react very carefully. Because there are a lot of different opinions in the region about what to do about Venezuela.
Right. It's not all totally united in terms of how to deal with Maduro.
Exactly. I mean, some countries, like Colombia, Brazil, they've been very critical of Maduro. But others have kept closer ties with his government.
So it's a tough spot for the U.S. They want to take a strong stance against Maduro, but they also don't want to upset their allies in the region by pushing too hard.
You got it. It's all a balancing act. And of course, we have to talk about the Venezuelan opposition. At the end of the day, it's really up to them to determine what happens to their country.
So what do they need to focus on moving forward? What are the key things they need to do?
Well, first and foremost, they have to find a way to work together. They need to show a united front. Because if they seem divided, unsure of themselves, it's going to be that much harder to get people to support them, both inside Venezuela and internationally.
Unity is key. That makes sense. But it's more than just, saying they're united, right? Don't they also need a plan, a vision for what happens if Maduro is forced out?
Exactly. The Venezuelan people need a reason to believe that change is possible. They need to believe that the opposition can actually offer a real alternative to Maduro's government. So they need a plan for how they'll deal with all the issues, the economic crisis, the humanitarian situation, all of it.
It's a huge challenge facing them. The stakes are incredibly high.
No doubt about it. I mean, the situation in Venezuela, it's complicated. There are no easy solutions, and things could definitely get worse. But there's always hope, right? Maybe, just maybe, this could all eventually lead to some really positive change. It's hard to say for sure right now.
It's a good reminder that even when things seem really bleak, the desire for freedom, for democracy, it's powerful, and that's what we're seeing in Venezuela. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Venezuelan politics, here's something for you all to think about. In a world where more and more leaders are becoming authoritarian, where geopolitics are so complex, what more can be done to support the people in Venezuela? And not just Venezuela, but everywhere. People are fighting for their basic rights, for democracy. Keep asking the tough questions and stay engaged because, well, it matters. Your voice matters. Your awareness matters.